This video will outline a possible structure for your Chemistry IA exploration section. The possible subheadings you might use are Introduction, Research Question, Background Information, Methodology, and the Safety, Ethical and Environmental Considerations. Let's start with the introduction. Possible questions you might answer are things like, firstly, what is the general topic your investigation is related to? Why have you chosen this topic? Why is this topic important? Why might the reader care? And finally, what is the specific focus? This short section simply outlines what and why you are investigating something. Let's now consider the research question. Most good chemistry IAs will at some point identify a pattern between two variables. So a general framework for a good research question is something like this. How does changing X, which would be your independent variable, affect Y, which would be your dependent variable, as measured using Z, which would be the approach or technique that you're going to be using. Of course, it should finish with a question mark because it's a question. This framework should provide enough detail and focus to allow the reader to understand exactly what it is you'll be investigating. Let's now consider the background information. This section should include all of the information required for your reader to understand everything that you do and write about in your internal assessment. Questions you might answer could be, what is the chemistry behind your research question? What is the chemistry behind the specific method you have chosen to use? Why did you choose this method? What data will you be collecting? And what technique will you use to process your data? A detailed background information section will also help you understand the chemistry behind your investigation. Let's now consider the methodology section. The methodology part of your exploration might be broken down into subheadings for clarity. First of all, we might want to state explicitly what the variables are in the investigation. As well as stating each type of variable, you may also want to add detail such as how you will be measuring your dependent variable and how you will be controlling your controlled variables. The second subsection here might be related to your pre-trials or practice run. In this subsection, you can identify what you learned from your pre-trials and what changes you might make for your final procedure. This is particularly important if you are using an existing procedure to demonstrate personal engagement and initiative. Thirdly, you might state your equipment and chemicals. And be sure to state specific quantities of chemicals such as mass, volume or concentrations. Fourth, you will need to outline your procedure. And the most simple way to do this is using numbered steps, but making sure to justify every decision you're making. We normally encourage students to write in the past passive tense, but ultimately it doesn't really matter. Let's now consider the final subsection of the exploration, which is safety, ethical and environmental considerations. For safety, you might first consider hazards in your procedure. For example, will there be naked flames in your investigation? And secondly, you'll want to consider the hazards of the specific chemicals you're using. To identify the hazards of specific chemicals, Google the name of your chemical followed by MSDS, which stands for Material Safety Data Sheet. This will provide a list of hazard symbols you can identify and suggest precautions you can take to minimize those risks. It's important when you do this that you take into account the specific quantities, such as concentrations of the chemicals being used, and ensure that you find the relevant hazard. Example hazard symbols might be things like irritant or corrosive or harmful to the environment. The second subsection here is ethics. Now, in a chemistry IA, there are very rarely ethical considerations, so if there are not any, it's worth being explicit and stating there are no ethical considerations, just in case. The final subsection here are environmental considerations. And this section relates to how you will dispose of any products produced in any processes in your investigation. A key indicator to look for here would be a hazard symbol harmful to the environment related to any of the chemicals you've used throughout. Again, this might depend on the specific quantities and concentrations of chemicals that you've used. In summary, these are the 5 subheadings you might use to structure a good exploration section in a chemistry IA. I hope this video has been of some help.